Today I want to talk about having a day job while you're trying to break into the illustration industry. And to save you some time, I think it's a good idea to have another job and not dive into full-time freelancing too soon. So we're going to look at how you can make the most of your limited time if you're working on illustration on the side, and how you can transition from illustration as the side hustle to illustration as the main job with something else on the side to pay the bills, all the way to full-time illustration. I'm James, and I help illustrators build their careers, sometimes from outside. And first, let me tell you how I did it so you don't make the same mistakes I did. I had a very promising start. I'd already got my first couple of freelance illustration jobs before I left university. Nothing glamorous, but they paid real money, so I was pretty confident. Cocky is possibly a better word for it. There was even a double-page spread on me and my work in Mac User magazine, which is mortifyingly embarrassing when I think back on it, because the picture I sent them of myself was me holding a pint, dressed in a lab coat for some reason. I don't know what I was thinking. I'd worked in bars and restaurants through college, so I had a bit of money saved up. And I'm pretty sure I read somewhere that it was good to have 3 months expenses, rent, that kind of thing, saved up before going freelance. And that seemed reasonable at the time. How hard could it be to start getting regular full-time work as an illustrator? Easy, right? So when I left university, I quit my job to go freelance full-time. My thinking was that I could do it part-time, but it'll take longer. And there's some logic in that. And I wanted to get up and running fast. But I didn't treat my savings very carefully. I bought myself a new computer and rented a studio and burned through them pretty quickly. It's amazing how quick money disappears when there's nothing coming in. If I'd have been more careful with my money, it probably wouldn't have been a big deal. But basically, I ran out quick, so I had to go and get another job. And that in itself was a pretty challenging thing to deal with mentally. It felt like a big deal. It felt like failing. I'd set out with such high hopes at the beginning and then just tripped at the first hurdle. Getting a job seemed like going backwards. What's more, the job I got was working behind a bar again, working evenings and into the early hours. Some people like to do their creative work in the mornings, and some people like to do it in the evenings. Well, I was serving drinks in the evenings and sleeping in late every day, so illustration only got my least productive hours in the afternoons. Working that job sucked out all my energy and creativity and joy, honestly. If illustration is your primary goal, you have to try as much as possible to engineer all the other parts of your life to support that goal. And my job did the exact opposite. So if I could go back and do it again, I would have a day job from day one while I was trying to build up illustration on the side. Ideally something where I could practice my creative skills, and if not, a job that didn't take up too much of my energy, where I didn't have to think too much about work and I could leave work at work. Maybe gardening would be nice. Yeah. Let's look at the positives of having a day job, or evening job, first. It's money, basically. I don't know where I read 3 months savings would be enough to see me through, but that seems like a pretty unrealistic best case scenario now. Maybe if you're later in life and you have a bit of experience in the creative industries and you know how things work, but it still seems kind of ambitious to me. We just can't know how long it's going to take to find our first freelance client. And that's just the first step. You might get your first freelance client within 3 months, but then have to wait another 3 months to get the second one. It's probably going to take a while. Maybe a year or two before you're working regularly as a freelancer, and you need to pay your rent and you need to pay for life. And having a job is going to mean that you can just tick that box. You have security and stability and a regular paycheck every month. That in itself takes off a hell of a lot of pressure. It means you can take your time and build up your portfolio and learn the skills you need, which is good. But there's potentially a downside to that too. I think a bit of pressure is good. If you get too comfortable with that regular paycheck, you might take your eye off the ball and lose motivation to pursue your main objective. I think planning ahead and giving yourself some deadlines is a good idea in this case, just so you can stay focused on the goal. Maybe you want to have the first version of your portfolio up and running in 3 months. And you can set some targets of how many clients you want to reach out to or how many new illustrations you want to make each month. Earning money means you can reinvest some of that into your illustration practice too. Whether that's taking online courses or upgrading your tech, you've got the money to do it without digging into your savings. It also means you don't need to take on any freelance job that comes your way. At the beginning, you're probably going to get some really crappy offers for paid work. Low fees or risky or boring clients, painting your neighbour's cat, that kind of thing. You can take them on if you want to, but you don't need to. You can hold out for more interesting opportunities. Let me know in the comments what the worst offer for a job you've ever had from a client was. Mine was probably designing my mum's business cards. She's in the funeral business too, so not much room for creative flair. There are some downsides too, of course. Working at a job and spending a lot of your free time on illustration is very demanding. You have to be really dedicated and disciplined. And some people might need to pace themselves to avoid burning themselves out. I say some people because I don't believe that's true of everyone. If illustration is something you really love, then it probably won't feel like work. My various side projects are what give me energy for now. When burnout catches up with me, it's going to be absolutely catastrophic. But it is definitely important to find a sustainable balance for you. It's not healthy to work all the time, even if it's something you enjoy. The biggest downside of having a job while you're also trying to get into illustration is that you have less time. If your pay the bills job is 9 to 5 full time, then you've got to find time, evenings and weekends, to work on your portfolio. That means saying no to all the other things you could be doing. And if you've got limited time, you've got to make sure the time you do spend on illustration is spent wisely and effectively, which is what this channel is all about. Hit subscribe if you're not already. Time management is something busy people have to get really good at, but it takes a while to get good at it, and it takes discipline. I'm a bit of a productivity nerd, so planning my schedule and thinking about my morning routine and slotting my calendar together is fun for me, but I know it's not for everyone. Planning ahead and making... I just found some pigs in the forest. Pigs in the forest. Planning ahead and making meta decisions makes life so much simpler. If you leave the decision making about when you're going to work on your portfolio until the day, we can be so easily swayed and blown off course by invites to do other things, the weather, how tired you are, and all kinds of other things. If you get home from your day job at 5:30 and then decide whether or not you're going to work on your portfolio for a couple of hours, half the time you'll probably decide you want to watch Netflix instead. But if you decide in advance that Tuesday and Thursday evenings every week you do illustration work for 3 hours and you do 4 hours on a Sunday afternoon, and that is your rule and your routine, you don't need to make the decision when you're tired or hungry or your friend wants to go for a coffee. You've already committed to the plan. It's the same sort of principle as meal prep. If you want to eat healthy, prep a load of healthy meals in advance. Then when you're tired on a Wednesday night, and the easy option would usually be getting a burger, you've got a load of healthy food in the fridge ready to go. Nice and easy. And you can thank your past self for being so thoughtful. Thanks, James, for this dry couscous and cucumber. Make good decisions when you're feeling high energy and motivated and determined, and all you have to do is stick to them when you're not. I'm not saying you can't be flexible, and sometimes you have to be flexible. You don't have to stick to everything 100% all the time. I love a burger or a kebab, but if you think about what an ideal week looks like, then at least you have something to aim for. Some kind of hawk? Massive it was. The actual hours you put into any one illustration session are not as important as the routine of doing it regularly. If you've got kids, for example, your schedule is probably going to be all over the place. And I'm not going to go telling you need to spend 15 hours per week on your portfolio, because it's just not practical. But I will tell you that a little bit of work repeated regularly over time is much more important than doing big long sessions once every 2 or 3 weeks, because you'll forget what you learned and lose your creative insights in between. Ha! I'm falling! Do you know how to eat an elephant? One bite at a time. So if your elephant is getting a professional portfolio together and you can only dedicate 4 hours a week to illustration, you might think, why bother at all? But actually, that presents a really interesting challenge. To make progress every week in those 4 hours means you've really got to cut out all the non-essentials and prioritize what will make the biggest difference. You don't want to waste any of that time, so keep a tidy workspace, physical and digital. Yeah, I see those files on your desktop. Then you can find things and get straight on with whatever project you're working on. Maybe while you're commuting to your job or you're out for a walk, you can start to plan out what your next illustration will be. So you can just dive in and start sketching once you get to your desk. You can do your thinking and your planning anywhere, and any time. I don't know what your goal is specifically, but let's imagine you wanted to get into conceptual illustration and you want to make 20 conceptual images. So you can make a checklist of what would go into a portfolio like that. Maybe science, finance, psychology, technology, mental health, etc. Spend 20 minutes looking through some online articles relating to each one of those subjects. Pick a few, save them to a folder, then you can spend an hour sketching out some really quick thumbnail sketches for each article. Just get all the ideas out there, pick your favourites, and then get to work on one of them. Then you can just tick them off as you do them. It might take 3 or 4 months to reach that target, but you're laser focused and you're not wasting any of that precious illustration time. I've said it before, many times, and I'll say it again. There are 2 essential steps. Make a load of work, then show that work to the people who can hire you or give you useful feedback. Everything else can wait. Okay, so let's say you found a sustainable routine doing your illustrations on the side, and you've made great progress with your portfolio, and you've been showing it to potential clients. Your day job is still paying the bills, but you're starting to get the occasional freelance job. For a while, you'll be able to fit these into your evenings and weekends, until you can't. You'll be getting more work than you can do in and around your other job, and that's great. Definitely an indication that you probably could go full-time because people like what you're making. If you've got a few months' rent saved up at this point, maybe now is a good time to do it. You've developed a routine and self-discipline, and you've got proof that you can do the job and people like what you're selling. If you haven't saved up much, maybe it still seems a little bit risky. So, depending on your job, you might be able to cut down your hours quite easily. With other jobs, it's not going to be so easy to do that, but you can test the water with your boss and see if you can negotiate a part-time position. Not every boss is going to support that, unfortunately, and that's fair enough because they've got to look out for their own interests. But so do you. So you might consider moving jobs and getting a different part-time job. You don't need to rush transitioning from a part-time to a full-time illustrator, but if you find you're getting a lot of attention from clients, you've got to strike while the iron is hot. You'll probably know when the right time is, but a good way to think about it is when you're making 50% of your day job salary from illustrating part-time and you've got some savings as a buffer. People often think of this part as taking the leap, going full-time. But I like the way Seth Godin thinks about it. The leap isn't quitting your job. The leap is starting it all. See you next time.